So we want to look at passive voice. And to begin with, it's important that we define what passive voice means. I've checked some definitions on the internet, but most of them are not so simple to understand. They complicate things. But I found one that was saying passive voice is essentially where you want to emphasize the target of an action as opposed to, emphasizing the who or what is actually doing the action. So this now means that we need to actually look back and understand what is a verb, what is like an action, what is an object, and what is a subject. Okay. So passive voice is basically where you write in a way that you want to emphasize the target of a verb, the target of an action, as opposed to telling people or emphasizing the person or thing who is actually doing that action. So this means that we need to understand, number one, what is a verb and what is an object and the subject. So those are the three components that form a sentence. So to just put that into perspective, let us understand that a simple sentence comprises a subject and then a verb and then an object. Now, what is a subject? A subject is basically the person or thing doing the verb. Okay, and then the verb is usually the doing word, and then the object is the target. Okay, the target of the action. Or in other words, the person or thing feeling the impact. So that if you have a sentence like Aswani drove the car, our verb, our subject will be Aswani, because Aswani is the person doing something in that sentence. Is the person doing the driving, okay? And our verb will be drove, which is essentially the past tense of the word of the verb drive, okay? And then obviously the object, from our definition, the object is the target of the action, okay? In this case, that would be the car. So the car is a person or thing feeling the impact, feeling the action of being driven, okay? So in this sentence, as you can see, we are emphasizing Aswani because we are mentioning Aswani first. We are emphasizing Aswani. We are emphasizing the subject of that sentence. However, I can as well rewrite this sentence so that I emphasize the driving. If I say the car was driven by Aswani, in this case, I'm emphasizing the car, and therefore I'm emphasizing the object, which means I'm emphasizing the target of the action. I'm emphasizing the target of the action as opposed to emphasizing the person actually doing that verb. Sometimes you can also have a sentence that does not even indicate the subject, the person doing the verb. Like if I say the car was driven. Here it's like whoever did the driving is besides the point. The point here is the driving. The car was driven. Okay. The point here is that the car, felt some impact. We are not really interested in mentioning who actually did the verb, who actually did the driving. So in academic writing, this is essentially speaking in passive voice, where you emphasize the subject, the target of the verb, the target of the verb, in which case is the object, where you emphasize the object. We call that speaking in passive voice. Whereas when you emphasize the subject, when you first of all want to show the person actually doing something, we call that speaking in active voice. Okay, maybe let me show you a more advanced example. Kenya is considered the most So if I have a sentence like this, Kenya is considered the most developed country in Africa, this sentence appears okay. But we are emphasizing Kenya, which is the object. We are emphasizing the object because Kenya is a person feeling the impact of which verb? Consideration. So if I was to now single out the subject and the verb and the object. So to identify the verb, it's so easy. Just look at the action word, which is in this case considered, from the verb consider. Now ask yourself, consider what? Consider who? You'll find the object will be Kenya. Kenya is the person feeling the impact, is the target of this word consideration, is the target of considered. The subject in this case will be missing, okay, because we don't know who is doing the consideration. So this sentence, as much as it may appear very correct, it is actually in passive voice, and therefore in academic writing, it will be considered wrong because we don't know who is doing the consideration. We don't know the person doing this thing. Who is actually talking about Kenya so that you can knock on their doors and ask them, you know what, where did you get these facts? So to change this sentence from passive voice to active voice, we need to introduce the person or thing doing that verb. For instance, we can say by the World Bank. If we do this, we have now introduced the subject, and therefore, if I was to single out the aspect, the element, subject will be the World Bank, verb itabaki venye ilikuwa, which is considered, and then our object will be Kenya. Okay, so we can as well do that. However, by doing this, if we do this, we are still emphasizing the object. We are still emphasizing Kenya because that is what we are starting with. And therefore, as much as the sentence is complete in terms of having subject, verb, and object, it is still wrong because we are still emphasizing the target of the verb or the action. So we need to rewrite this sentence so that we emphasize World Bank. We make World Bank the key aspect of what we are saying. We emphasize the World Bank. So in this case, to do that, we need to rewrite it beginning with the World Bank. Okay, the World Bank considers Kenya the most developed country in Africa. Now, this sentence is now correct. We have all the elements. So essentially, from my understanding, a sentence should have subject, verb, and object in that order for it to be considered active voice. Even if you have all these elements, but the object is appearing first, the sentence will still be considered passive voice because you're emphasizing the object of the target of the object, right? So this is the sentence. This is the correct sentence. So I don't know if I can introduce advanced examples. Let me see. So this is an example of a compound sentence because these are basically like two sentences, combined using a suitable conjunction. Okay. So the first sentence is the government has been steadfast in securing women's interests at the national stage. That is the first sentence. We can now isolate that sentence and have it separate. Okay. And then we also have a second sentence here. Which is now more needs to be done. So if you look at these two sentences, you will quickly notice that in the first sentence we have no problem. The subject in this case is the government. Okay, the key verb here is securing, from the word secure, and then the object will be women's interest. Okay, so what are you securing? Women's interest. Who is doing the securing? The government. So in this case, in the first part of the sentence, we are okay. But if you look at this second part of this sentence, you realize we are saying more needs to be done, but we're not indicating who is doing the more. So we are emphasizing more. Okay, we are emphasizing more, and more in this case becomes the object because that is what we are emphasizing. So we are emphasizing more as opposed to telling us who is actually supposed to be doing it. Okay, more needs to be done by who. Okay, so in this case, this second part will be in passive voice. So if you isolated the two sentences into separate sentences, if you isolated them, the first one will be okay, but the second one will be wrong. So if they are together like this, now the entire sentence becomes wrong, okay? Because now you have combined them. So the entire thing becomes wrong. So you need to isolate them and specifically state who is supposed to be doing the more. So you can just come here and say, it needs to do more. So while the government has been steadfast in securing women's interests at the national stage, it needs to do more to protect, okay, and advance the interests of the youth. So in this case, we are using it. It is a pronoun representing the government. So in this sentence, we are okay. So if I was now to look at this sentence and isolate subject, we'll have two sets of subjects, okay? The government, we'll have the government, and also it. Okay, so the government is one of the subjects here, and it is also another. So it in this case just representing the government. The verb will have to securing and also do. Okay, for the first part of the sentence, securing is a verb, and in the second case, it needs to do. Do is a verb. Okay, and then we have our object. In the first instance, first part of the sentence, women's interest is our target. And in the second instance, the object will be more. Okay. So that is basically understanding passive voice. And the best way to understand passive voice is to first of all locate the verb. Locate the key verb in that sentence. And then for you now, the best way to locate to identify if the sentence is in passive or active voice, the first thing you need to do is locate the verb. Okay, once you after locating the verb, ask yourself by who. Okay, and then ask yourself what. Okay, for instance, if you wanted to identify the verb in this sentence, if there's passive voice, you can identify the verb. In this case, the verb was considered. Ask yourself here by who. Okay, just ask yourself by who in front of the verb. Just add there by who. If you can locate the person in charge in that sentence, then therefore that sentence has the subject. Considered what? Kenya. Okay. So that is the easiest way to identify that. And just remember, for it to actually be in the correct order, subject needs to appear before the object. If you start with the object, it means you're emphasizing object, in which case you are basically speaking in passive voice. Okay, so that is basically everything you need to know about passive voice. So you can go back to the internet, read more, learn more about passive voice, and also learn how to avoid it. Okay, now we have a software called Grammarly.com that we usually use to correct our papers. One of the things that Grammarly will do, it will actually tell you some mistakes, including passive voice. If you speak in passive voice, Grammarly will tell you. For example, if you had this sentence, it will tell you this sentence is in passive voice and suggest that you convert it to active voice. However, it cannot do it for you because it doesn't know who the person was. It doesn't know it was the World Bank considering Kenya. It doesn't know. You're the only person who knows. But to make things easy for you, it will usually highlight the verb. It will usually highlight the verb in that sentence. So your job is to just go in front of that verb and add the question by who. And then now you can now answer it yourself because you're the person who knows whoever you are talking about. So Kenya is considered by who? So you need to stop there, go back to where you found that statement, look for the person involved, okay? And then introduce that person in that sentence, making sure that that person starts that sentence. You start with that person, that subject, because if you just, put here by, now you will be still speaking in passive voice, okay? So that is all about passive voice.